weal or for woe, the history of modern Vietnam is indissolubly associated with the name of one man, Ho Chi Minh.
Spanning a life of almost 80 years and credited with the defeat of the Japanese, French, and Americans in Vietnam, he has been variously called the Venerable Father of the Nation, the Washington of Vietnam, or simply Uncle by millions of Vietnamese who venerate him to the point of calling him a Bodhisattva, the savior of mankind, on an equal footing with the historical Buddha.
Yet even a cursory look at Ho's career will find that, apparently a simple man, he is a much more complicated figure than he is made out to be. Actually, he is more like the proverbial mystery wrapped in a riddle within an enigma.
Take his name, for instance. Born Nguyen Sinh Cung, he was given the courtesy name of Nguyen Tất Thanh in his early teens, then became Ba the Stoker when he went to work on a French merchant marine boat, Amiral Latouche Tréville, then Nguyen Ai Quoc, Nguyen the Patriot, the collective name of a small group of Vietnamese expatriates in France, then Lin when he went to the Soviet Union, Li Rui and Old Wang in China, Father Chin in Siam, present-day Thailand, T.V. Wong and Song Man Cho in Hong Kong, and later Hu Wang, among other names. Even the name for which he is best known, Ho Chi Minh, was a name borrowed from a dead man. Obviously, the man had something to hide and was very clever in covering his tracks, as most agents of international communism were trained to do, and Ho was no exception.
A Russian scholar fluent in Vietnamese, Anatoly Sokolov, has studied this question of names used by Ho Chi Minh. By his account, Ho used some 150 different names during his lifetime. Other accounts give an even higher figure, the incredible number of 167 names Ho used during his entire career, for besides the names that he called himself, he also used pseudonyms to pen eulogies for his own greatness.
In actuality, the most probable seems to be 1892, the date he gave when he applied in 1911 to be admitted to the colonial school in the hope of becoming useful to France. According to Droyker, there has also been skepticism over the actual day of his birth, May 19.
Nhưng ngày 19 tháng 5 là chắc chắn không phải.
May 19 was certainly not his birthday. This was because on that day, French Admiral d'Argenville wanted to visit Hanoi from Haiphong. To prepare for this, and this is, I believe, to be a clever move by a wizened politician, Ho Chi Minh thought that his French guests should not come into a cold, unwelcoming Hanoi. So he told my father, who was then his personal secretary, to go out and tell every government office that they were to celebrate my birthday on that date. In that way, when d'Argenville came into Hanoi, he found the city to be festooned with people happy in the streets. He thought that they were well disposed towards him, while in actuality they were celebrating the president's birthday.
Mừng sinh nhật của chủ tịch nước lúc bây giờ.
Then there was the matter of his death. Yung Tu Hung, the novelist, claims in her latest work, Blazing Peak, that Ho deliberately pulled out all his life supports so that he could die on Independence Day, September the 2nd, 1969, thus turning a day of national celebration into a day of national mourning.
This he did, according to the famed author, just to spite his closest associates, Les Duan and Les Duc Tho, and take revenge on them for having so surrounded him as to make him a prisoner in his own palace. Be that as it may, Ho's death on Independence Day has forced the Politburo to lie and announce to the world that he died one day later, thus ironically fulfilling a life in which there is no truth from birth to death.
In 1987, Vo Dong Yang, then representative of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam to UNESCO, sent a letter to the 24th General Assembly of this UN organization asking for permission to organize a party on the premises of UNESCO in Paris on the occasion of the upcoming 100th anniversary of the birth of Ho Chi Minh. In the letter, Yang also suggested that UNESCO pass a resolution making Ho a world cultural figure, but this effort ended in naught.
Lúc đó chúng tôi được anh em tín nhiệm làm tổng thư ký.
After the proposed resolution came out, the Vietnamese in Paris met and founded the committee to denounce Ho Chi Minh's crimes. The committee sent out an appeal, and in response, over 30,000 letters of protest from Vietnamese all over the world were sent to UNESCO. The committee also appealed to the French government and parliament to protest the proposed resolution. The committee then proceeded to gather all the evidence of Ho Chi Minh playing fast and loose with the truth and of the totalitarian regime which he established in Vietnam, resulting in such genocidal crimes and Holocaust as the killing in 1945-46 of at least 10,000 innocent members of various nationalist parties, whose only crime was to be rivals to the Communist Party. The land reform campaign in North Vietnam from 1952 to 1956 killed nearly 200,000 presumed landlords, in actuality unarmed civilians. The Hue massacre of 1968, which took the lives of 5,000 unarmed civilians, including women and children and old people, and religious leaders, and even foreign doctors and university professors. After they had studied the dossier we sent to them, UNESCO changed its mind about organizing the 100th anniversary of Ho Chi Minh's birth, scrapping it altogether. UNESCO also refused to participate in the function organized in Hanoi by the Vietnamese government. UNESCO also informed the Vietnamese embassy in Paris that no representative of the French government or of the municipal government in Paris would participate. In the end, it only agreed to let the embassy rent a room in its Trocadero headquarters, with the proviso that no Ho Chi Minh picture would be exhibited in the hallways or any other propaganda material mentioning Ho.
The hagiographies written in Hanoi about Ho Chi Minh are so filled with fictions that one cannot possibly go into all of them. For instance, at one time, it is said that his intelligence is far superior to most persons because he had 4 irises.
Then it is claimed that he was a child prodigy, teaching everything from math to science and French and Chinese, even martial arts and physical education, at a school in Phan Thiet, introducing his younger charges to the ideas of Voltaire, Montesquieu, and Rousseau. Beside the fact that the school was almost non-existent, this claim on the part of Ho is hardly credible in view of his own testimony. In the Vietnamese version of Anecdotes in the Active Life of President Ho Chi Minh, page 46, to the effect that 9 years later, he was still very weak in French.
From this place he has gone out is a famous story of how Ho, then 19, stood on the Nha Rong Pier in Saigon and decided to hire himself out as a good worker on a French merchant marine boat under the name of Ba, third brother, and determined to go out into the world seeking for ways to save the country from French domination. He was hired as a kitchen helper on June 2nd, 1911.
Ho Chi Minh left Vietnam and arrived in France on July 15, 1911. 2 months later, on September, he wrote 2 letters asking that he be admitted to the colonial school, hoping to become useful to France with regard to my compatriots, and at the same time to enable them to profit from instruction. From that evidence, it is clear that he did not yet have any idea of revolution or the idea of getting rid of the French. After that, there were a couple of letters that he wrote to his brother, Nguyen Sinh Hiem, asking for money and to the French resident in Hue asking that he had had his father looked up so that he could give him some money and reinstate him as a Mandarin, but the French did not respond.
Well, Ho Chi Minh in 1911 did something very special and very clear. He wrote 2 letters. We have 2 letters of Ho Chi Minh written on September 15th, 1911, from Marseille, one to the Minister of Colonies, the second one to the President of the Republic. And they're signed Nguyen Thuc Tan in both places, which is his real name. Said he was born in Vinh in 1892, the son of Nguyen Sinh Huy, which is the record. And in these 2 letters, he asked to enter the colonial school of the French. He wants to become a servant, a participant in French colonialism in Vietnam.
By the end of 1918, World War I was over. A new world seems to open up with President Wilson proclaiming his 14 points, one of which called for the self-determination of people. Even in Vietnam, French Governor-General Albert Sarraut also promised that the Vietnamese people would soon see a perceptible expansion of their political rights. Encouraged and strengthened by such trends, a group of Vietnamese patriots known as the Five Dragons, Ngũ Long, decided to submit to the Versailles Peace Treaty Conference an 8-point petition entitled Revendication du peuple annamite, Demands of the Vietnamese People.
A fairly moderate document, the demands only asked for political autonomy for the Vietnamese, coupled with the traditional democratic freedoms such as the freedoms of association, religion, press and movement, amnesty for political prisoners, equal rights for the Vietnamese with the French in Vietnam, and the abolition of forced labor, and the hated taxes on salts, opium, and alcohol.
Signed by Nguyen Ai Quoc, a pseudonym meaning Nguyen the Patriot, it was in fact a collaborative effort of the lawyer Phan Van Truong and the famous nationalist Phan Chu Trinh, assisted by the young Nguyen Thuc Tan, later Ho Chi Minh, who volunteered to go and present the petition to the Versailles Conference. Later, Ho Chi Minh, under the pseudonym of Truong Dien Tien, claimed that he had been the author, even though he admitted, according to Droiker, that Phan Van Truong had helped him to draft it in intelligible French. This is clearly a travesty sin.
Nguyen Ai Quoc was the common pen name of a number of Vietnamese patriots in France at the time. Among this group were the Nguyen Te Duyen, Phan Van Duyen, Phan Ju Jin. Ho was then a fresh arrival in France, a young man with no political record for the French Sûreté to worry about. That is why the other older men let him be the front man and sign the documents or articles which they wrote or drafted, individually or collectively. Even Ho himself admitted as much when, under the pen name of Tran Gian Tien, he wrote the anecdotes on the active life of President Ho Chi Minh on page 46 as follows. Nguyen did not have enough French at the time, so he had insistently pleaded with Mr. Phan Van Duyen to write on his behalf. Mr. Duyen was an excellent writer in French, but did not wish to sign these documents. That is why Nguyen had to sign those articles.
One of Ho Chi Minh's main claims to being a poet, and a poet in Chinese to boot, is based on a collection of poetry which was totally unknown before 1960, when, for the first time, it was revealed to be a work written nearly 20 years earlier by Ho himself, while he was being incarcerated in a series of Kuomingtang jails in southern China. The circumstances surrounding this discovery have never been explained satisfactorily. For instance, the manuscript of the prison diary, which was attributed to Ho, shows on the cover the following dates: 29 of August 1932 through 10 of September 1933. Ho Chi Minh, however, did not get arrested by Chiang Kai-shek's troops until 10 years later in 1942 and was later released over a year later in September 1943. The first author to bring out this discrepancy is no other than Professor Dang Thai Mai, the father-in-law of General Vo Nguyen Giap.
Other persons who have had a chance to study the collection also have reservations about Ho's authorship of the work. Professor Le Hu Muk, a scholar of classical literature and an expert in Chinese, some years ago wrote a book, Ho Chi Minh is not the author of the prison diary. Because of his tight and well-argued reasoning, the book really caused a stir in Hanoi, and a spate of the very best scholars were ordered to refute Professor Muk's arguments. Other authors have studied the question as well, and most are in agreement with Professor Muk.
The Soviet poet Pavel Konkovsky once went all the way to Hanoi and spoke with Ho Chi Minh about this work as he intended to study and write about it. He came away rather disappointed after he met with Ho Chi Minh in November 1958. He not only did not quite confirm that he was the author of the work, instead, he deliberately avoided answering that question.
Ho Chi Minh has a book of Chinese poems. It's called Prison Diary, Ngục Chung Nhật Ký. It was claimed in 1960 that Ho Chi Minh was the author of that book. But there's a lot of internal evidence showing that we could doubt very much that authorship. Whereas Ho Chi Minh was imprisoned by Chiang Kai-shek only in 1942-43. Then the amount of poems in there is also very questionable. Sometimes it's claimed that it has 100 poems, at other times 120, at other times 135, and now people even talk about possibly 150. Then you look at the content of these poems, then you see in cases that the author of the poems, for instance, praised Chiang Kai-shek for his victories over the Japanese. So it's very, very peculiar that Ho Chi Minh, a Vietnamese patriot, would then praise Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalist government. And because of that, in the translation, sometimes Hanoi has had to doctor the translation, put in there things that are not in the original in order to make reference to Vietnam.
Hanoi historians have done their best to paint Ho Chi Minh as a man without a fault. What they end up with is a caricature that has nothing with the real man as we know him. On this score, the most egregious distortion of Ho's life probably has to do with his relations to women. Readers of Hanoi's hagiographies of Ho Chi Minh would never know that he could be human, with sexual needs and needs for affections like the rest of us. No, he had to be a saint, sacrificing every personal happiness to the cause of the revolution. Such a version carries with it consequences that amount to big lies and injustices. For instance, if outside of Vietnam, Ho's love life is pretty well known, inside the country, one could go to jail or at least lose one's job for claiming something different other than the official version.
In 1992, basing herself on French and Chinese sources, Vu Kim Han, the editor-in-chief of the immensely popular magazine Doi Jia, reported that Ho Chi Minh had a Chinese wife in the person of Zhang Sui Ming, Tang Duet Ming, whom he married in 1926 in a ceremony witnessed by Chu Enlai's wife, and had with her a daughter. Right away, she was relieved of her post at the paper. In his giant biography of Ho Chi Minh, A Life, William Duiker was very well disposed towards the man